Why does a lion, hungry and fully capable of killing, sometimes stand a few feet from an antelope calf and simply walk away? Picture kneeling in dry grass at dusk, the earth still warm under your hands, dust hanging in the last orange light, and a leopard's eyes locked onto a young gazelle only steps away. Nothing separates that leopard from an easy meal except itself. Most people watch a moment like this and reach for the same word immediately: mercy. It feels obvious. A predator looks at something small and helpless, and something like compassion takes over. But here's the uncomfortable part. The people who actually study this behavior for a living aren't nearly as confident as we are. Every explanation they've proposed so far explains some of these encounters, and quietly fails to explain the rest. So before you decide this is a story about kindness, sit with this question a little longer, because the real answer took researchers years, several wrong turns, and one deeply strange discovery to even begin piecing together. The first idea researchers reach for is the simplest one. The predator just wasn't hungry enough. This is called satiation, and there's real evidence behind it. A leopard that has recently fed often shows almost no interest in nearby prey, even prey standing well within easy striking range, because the internal trigger that switches hunting behavior on simply hasn't fired. Paired with this is something called predatory inhibition, the idea that certain size and movement cues have to be present for an attack response to activate at all, and a young or unusually still animal sometimes just doesn't trigger them. It's a tidy explanation. It fits a lot of the footage people share online, and for a while this is where most nature documentaries stop the conversation entirely, wrapping the whole phenomenon in a neat, satisfying bow. Except it doesn't hold up nearly as well as it first appears to, because researchers kept finding cases where a clearly hungry, clearly capable predator still walked away from prey that met every single trigger it was supposed to respond to. So a second hypothesis entered the conversation, one that's a lot messier and a lot more human-sounding than anyone expected. Some researchers point to hormonal state, especially in females, suggesting that maternal or parental hormonal shifts can, in rare circumstances, dampen aggression toward anything that resembles a vulnerable young animal, regardless of species. Others point to something almost embarrassingly simple: play. Young predators in particular sometimes engage prey the way a house cat engages a toy, chasing, pawing, even standing over it, without ever committing to a kill, because the behavior is closer to practice than predation. And then, there's an idea researchers rarely say out loud on camera: mistaken identity, moments where a predator's threat detection system briefly misreads an unfamiliar species entirely, treating it like something it isn't built to hunt at all. None of this is footage friendly. None of it fits neatly into a single caption. But it's here that things stop looking like one phenomenon and start looking like several unrelated ones, wearing the same disguise. The case researchers keep returning to, precisely because it refuses to fit any of these boxes cleanly, comes from Zambia. In 1996, wildlife researchers there documented a lioness repeatedly seen near orphaned oryx calves over several weeks, at one point appearing to position herself between a calf and other predators nearby. It remains one of the most cited and most debated examples of unusual predator behavior on record, precisely because it doesn't collapse neatly into satiation, hormones, or mistaken identity. Remember that leopard from the opening, frozen just steps from the gazelle. Cases like the Zambian lioness suggest whatever froze that leopard might not have a single clean name at all. And that's exactly the moment researchers realized they'd been asking the wrong question from the start. Instead of asking why one predator ignores one prey animal, they started asking something else entirely. What happens when you compare hundreds of these cases side by side? That comparison is where the real surprise showed up, and it has almost nothing to do with hunger. First, when the same individual predator was tracked over time, tolerance appeared far more often toward one specific familiar animal than toward unfamiliar members of the exact same prey species, almost as if repeated exposure had quietly recalibrated the response. The same way a smoke detector eventually stops reacting to burnt toast, while still reacting to anything unfamiliar. Second, orcas observed nudging injured seals toward the surface rather than attacking them. Turned out to be far more contested than early reporting suggested, with researchers split between calling it protective behavior, misdirected play, or even a hunting practice ritual aimed at younger pod members watching nearby, meaning the same clip that looks like tenderness in a headline might actually be something closer to a training exercise. Third, and this is the piece that changed the entire investigation. In social carnivores specifically, wolves being the clearest documented case, subordinate animals were far more likely to hold back from catchable prey, specifically when a dominant pack member was present and watching, a pattern that had nothing to do with the prey animal at all, and everything to do with who else was in the room. That third finding is worth sitting with, because it means the audience, not the prey, may be running the calculation the whole time. If restraint shows up more consistently around other pack members than around prey itself, then what looks like an isolated act of mercy toward one small animal might actually be a social signal aimed at an entirely different member of the group, something closer to posturing within a hierarchy than a decision about the antelope at all. If your brain just quietly reframed everything from the first half of this video, you are exactly where the researchers were. That's usually the point where people hit subscribe, honestly, because the next case study picks up exactly where this one left off. Here's the part worth being honest about, because it changes what this video actually promised you. In the overwhelming majority of documented cases, what looks like protection is really an absence of attack, not an active choice to guard or defend. And that distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. But real active protection does exist, rarely, and it's stranger than the passive version. There are documented cases of lionesses adopting and nursing calves of entirely different species for days at a time. There are recorded instances of dolphins actively circling and shielding injured swimmers from approaching sharks, physically placing their own bodies between the threat and the person in the water. These cases are rare enough that researchers still argue over what triggers them, but they exist, and they're the closest thing to genuine cross-species protection that's ever been reliably documented. If a case like that is the one you want us to dig into next, say so in the comments, because that list is exactly how the next video on this channel gets built. So go back to that leopard in the grass, frozen just steps from the gazelle, dusk settling over both of them like it was holding its breath. What looked like one thing, mercy, quietly turned out to be several different things, wearing the same expression. An unfired trigger, a hormonal accident, a training exercise, a social signal meant for someone else entirely watching from a distance. The wild isn't kind, and it isn't cruel either. It's precise, running calculations most of us will never see, and every so often, that precision happens to look exactly like grace. If this changed how you think about predators, even a little, hit like, subscribe for the next one, and tell us below which strange animal encounter deserves the same investigation next, because that's exactly how this series keeps going.